All right, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect right here on the stream yard. So if you're watching from my YouTube channel, make sure you share and subscribe to the channel if you like the contents that you're watching. If you are watching from Facebook, make sure you share this video on Facebook as well. So, today is something that's very important in Black history. All right. Um, and today is the independence of Liberia. So, why is Liberia so important on this particular day? Well, because if we look at the free African Americans, the former African American slaves, they went over to Africa, right? And they found the land with the help of the United States, of course, and they called that area Liberia. So parts of Liberia was founded by African Americans, and all of Liberia actually, and parts of Sierra Leone was occupied by African Americans as well. But today we're going to talk about Liberia. So let's look at the country of Liberia. All right, so this is the flag. All right, and if you notice, the flag is similar to ours, right? Because again, it goes to show you that the word Liberia means liberty. So African Americans were able to settle into the land of Africa and they found liberty. They found their freedom. All right. So Liberia is like a mixed country, with different tribes, not only just African Americans, but also Caribbean people. But you also have some Native Africans that come from different tribes all bunched up together. So let's go ahead and let's read up on Liberia. All right. Here it is. So it says Liberia, officially the Republic of Liberia, is a country on the West African coast. It is bordered by Sierra Leone to its northwest, Guinea to its north, Ivory Coast to its east, and the Atlantic Ocean to its southwest. It has a population of around 5 million and covers an area of 111,369 square kilometers, right? Which is 43,000 square miles. English is the official language, but over 20 indigenous languages are spoken, representing the numerous ethnic groups who make up more than 95% of the population. The country's capital and largest city is Monrovia. Liberia began as a settlement of the American Colonization Society, who believed Black people would face better chances for freedom and prosperity in Africa than in the United States. The country declared its independence on July 26th of 1847. The United States did not recognize Liberia independence until February the 5th, 1862, during the American Civil War. Between January 7, 1822 and the American Civil War, more than 15,000 freed and freeborn Black people who faced legislated limits in the United States, and 3,198 Afro-Caribbeans were relocated to the settlement by Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln played his role in sending former African slaves over to Liberia. The settlers carried their culture and tradition with them. The Liberian Constitution and flag were modeled after those of the U.S. On January 3rd, 1848, Joseph Jenkins Roberts, a wealthy, free-born African American from Virginia who settled in Liberia, was elected Liberia's first president after the people proclaimed independence. All right, so let's look up who Joseph Jenkins Roberts was real quick. All right. All right, so this is Joseph Jenkins Roberts, okay? And it was said to be that he was elected the first president after the people proclaimed independence. He was elected the first president of Liberia. So now let's see what he had to say. Okay. So right here, I'm on americaslibrary.gov, right? And it says a young African American man from Virginia named Joseph Jenkins Roberts declared the colony of Liberia in West Africa an independent republic on July 26 of 1847. The following year, he became the first elected president of the new countries. Roberts had moved there in 1829 at the age of 20 from Petersburg, Virginia. At that time, Liberia was a colony owned by a group of people in the United States. Who were they and what did they plan to do with Liberia? All right, so let's look more into about Joseph Jenkins. Okay. All right, so here's Joseph Roberts. Now, who was he? Again, he was an African American merchant who immigrated to Liberia in 1829, where he became a noted politician, elected as the first and seventh president of Liberia. Okay, at the independence, he was the first male African descent to govern the country, serving previously as governor from 1841 to 1848. Born free in Norfolk, Virginia, Roberts immigrated as a young man with his mother's sibling, wife, and child to young West Africa colony. He opened a trading firm in Monrovia and later engaged in politics. All right. Then it says, after Liberia became independent on July 26, 1847, Robert was elected as the First Nation president until 1856. In 1872, he was elected again to serve as Liberia's seventh president, etc. All right. So then it says that he was born free, the second of the oldest seven children. His father was to be a planter of Welsh origin. Joseph's mother, Amelia, described as a mulatto who was quite fair, was the planter's slave mistress or concubine, and he freed her when she was still young before Joseph was born. Amelia gave all of her children but one the middle name of Jenkins, which suggests that was likely the surname of their biological father. All right, check this out. After being free, Amelia moved and married James Roberts, a free black. Robert gave her children his surname and raised them as his own. Roberts owned a boating business on the James River. By the time of his death, he had acquired substantial wealth for a free man of color of those times. Joseph Roberts and his siblings, by the planter, were estimated to be of 7/8 European ancestry. The Liberian historian Abayomi Carnegie explained in 1926 he was not really black. He was an Octoroon. That's the first time I ever heard that term, Octoroon. And could have easily passed for a white man. However, his native Virginia classified him as person of color because he was born to a mother of African descent. Right? And then it goes on to say that the family moved to Petersburg, an industrial city on the upper James River with a substantial population of free people of color. As a boy, Joseph began to work in his stepfather's business, handling goods on a flatboat that transported materials from Petersburg to Norfolk, Virginia on the James River. Shortly after the family relocated, his stepfather, James Roberts, died. Joseph continued to work in his family business, but also served as an apprentice in a barbershop. The owner of the barbershop, William Colson, was also a minister and one of Virginia's best educated black residents. He gave Roberts access to his private library, which provided much of the youth's early education. All right, so now I never heard this term right here, octoroon. Octoroon. Let's see what that is real fast. We not gonna stay too long. Or what they call quarteroon. So in the slave societies of the Americas, a quarteron or quarteron was a person with 1/4 African and 3/4 of European ancestry, or in Australia, 1/4 Aboriginal ancestry. Okay, similar classification with octoroon for 1/8 black. Latin octo means eight, and hexadecaron for 1/6 black, 16th black. Okay, so they didn't use the term mulatto, right? So basically, they were saying that in our technical term, we'll use the term mutt. So if you mutt means that you're, multiracial. So his mother, Joseph Roberts' mother, was considered to be a mulatto woman, right? That means she was biracial. And his biological father was supposed to have been a white man. So he had African ancestry, but he had double European ancestry because his mother had part European in her, and his father was European, but his mother had African. So they didn't really see that as being African at that time period. And you know what? Again, we will find out a lot of our ancestry is consist of that. That we have people that are multiracial, you know what I'm saying, that have multi-ethnic background. So once you discover that DNA, that lineage, you will know that. But if you want to look up more information about that, go Calderon, right, on WikiOne. So let me get back to the source. All right, so let's get back to Joseph Jenkins Roberts' life. Okay. All right, so it says marriage and family. In 1828, Roberts married an 18-year-old woman named Sarah. They had an infant child whom they took with them when they immigrated the next year to the new colony of Liberia under the auspices of the American Colonization Society. Both Sarah and the child died in the first year of living in the colony. There was a very high rate of mortality due to disease among settlers to the new colony, right? And sometime after his wife's death, Roberts married again to Jane Rose Waring in 1836 in Monrovia, Liberia. She was the daughter of Colston Waring and Harriet Graves, other Virginians who had immigrated to the colony. So there was a lot of Virginian people that immigrated over to Liberia. So let's look up what the American Colonization Society is. All right, let's look that up real fast. All right, so the Society for the Colonization of Free People of Color of America, commonly known as American Colonization Society, was founded in 1816 by Robert Finley to encourage and support the voluntary migration of free African Americans to the continent of Africa, right? And check this out, it says, there were several factors that led to the establishment of the American Colonization Society. The number of free slaves and their descendants grew steadily since the American Revolutionary War, from 60,000 in 1790 to 300,000 by 1830. And slave owners were concerned that free blacks might encourage or help their slaves to escape or rebel. It was also believed by many that the amalgamation or integration of African Americans with mainstream American culture was out the question. They needed to relocate elsewhere where they could live free of white prejudice. All right. So the main purpose of the American Colonization Society was to give African Americans an opportunity to go elsewhere outside America, and one of the places to go is to Africa. So they don't have to be under the rulership of white people, or they thought they wouldn't have to be under the rulership of white people, but they can go freely, they can live in the land, they can create and do what they want, right? But here it goes. And it says the African American community was overwhelmingly opposed to the project. In many cases, their families had lived in the United States for generations, and their prevailing sentiments was that they were no more African than the white Americans were British. Contrary to stating claims that immigration was voluntary, some blacks were pressured to immigrate. In several scenarios, slaves were manumitted on condition that they immigrated immediately. So there were some black people that decided they want to stay in America, right? Because they have got so used to it and they've been here for generations, right? Then there were those who say, okay, thank you for the opportunity. It was nice dealing with y'all, but I got to go. I'm going to go back to the native land of my ancestors, right? And some of them were under pressure and was forced to go over to Africa, just go over there. So it was like, okay, you did your work here. Now we're going to send you to Africa. But you sent them to Africa with a colonized mindset. You sent them to Africa with the European philosophy, right? With a Western type of philosophy. So when they went over there to Liberia, they didn't go there with a mindset of an African. They went there with a mindset of an American, with a mindset of a oppressor, so to speak, because they have been so domesticated, right? And by many of them being so domesticated, they carry on the ideology that they learned from the country that has domesticated them and that has oppressed them. All right. And so, and then it says historian Mark Leeperson has stated that colonization proved to be a giant failure, doing nothing to stem the forces that brought the nation to civil war. Between 1821 and 1847, only a few thousand African Americans, blacks, out of the then millions in the U.S. immigrated to what would become Liberia. Many of them died from tropical diseases. In addition, the transportation of the immigrants to the African continent, including the provision of requesty tools and supplies, proved very expensive. Then it goes on to say, starting in 1830s, the society was met with great hostility from white abolitionists led by William Lloyd Garrison, editor of the Liberator, who proclaimed the society a fraud. According to Garrison and his many followers, the society was not a solution to the problem of American slavery. It actually was helping and was intended to help to preserve it. Okay, so there was some critics, right? And one of the critics was a white critic that felt that it does you no good just sending these black people back to Africa. Basically, that's what he's saying. Because what is that going to do? How's that going to help? You ain't doing them no justice. So you got them going through all of this, and now you just say, hey, go back to Africa. So he felt like that it was only benefiting the society, right? The American colonization society more than it benefited the black people themselves. That's how William Lloyd Garrison felt. All right, so with that being said, we're gonna go back to Brother Joseph real fast, right? And then we're going to get back into Liberia. Okay. Okay, so then it says that Robert decided to join a group of fellow Virginians preparing to leave for Monrovia, the capital of the young colony. Although Roberts was educated and relatively successful merchant by the time he and his family immigrated, the restriction in Virginia on free Negroes played an important part in his decision, as they were not able to live as full citizens, largely prohibiting from meaningful education, voting, bearing arms, worshiping, or even or even gathering without the supervision of white authorities and other social constraints. Did you just hear that? Let's read that one more time. Robert decided to join a group of fellow Virginians, preparing to leave for Monrovia, the capital of the young colony. Although Robert was educated and relatively successful merchant by the time he and his family immigrated, the restriction in Virginia on free Negroes played an important part of his decision, as they were not able to live as full citizens, largely prohibited from meaningful education, voting, bearing arms, worshiping, or even gathering without the supervision of white authorities and other social constraints. Think about that for a moment. Then it says the Robert family was strongly religious, and they felt called to evangelize the indigenous people of Africa. On February 9th of 1829, they sailed for Africa on the ship Harriet, along with Robert's mother and five of his six siblings. Another passenger on the same ship was James Springs Payne, who later became a leader and was elected as Liberia's fourth president. All right, and several years before leaving for Liberia, Roberts established a business with his friend William Nelson Colson from Petersburg, known as Roberts Colson and Company. The partnership continued and even expanded after Roberts immigrated, exploiting palm products, camwood, and ivory to the United States, and traded American goods at a company store in Monrovia. Roberts made several trips to the United States, including stops in New York, Philadelphia, Richmond, as a representative of the firm. And in 1835, Colson immigrated to Liberia but died shortly after his arrival. Expanding into coastal trade, the Roberts family became successful members of the local establishment. All right, so that's just to give you a little background about the first president of Liberia. Okay, and then I want to read something real fast. And it says Independence for Liberia on July 26, 1894. I'm on the American Library.gov. In 1822, Reverend Jehundi Ashman led the settlement effort and negotiated with the native people for a piece of land at Cape Macerado. The colony grew as it became a home for freed African Americans, slaves released from the West Indies, and slave ships, right? And many native tribal people. By 1847, Joseph Jenkins Robert had become a leader in the colony and felt Liberia was ready for independence. Still a country today, Liberia deals with conflict between descendants of African Americans and indigenous tribes. Have you heard of Liberia before? See if you can find it on the map of West Africa. All right, so now let's go back and talk about the independence of Liberia. All right, so going back to Liberia real quick. It says Liberia was the first African republic to proclaim its independence, and it's Africa's first and oldest modern republic. All right. It retained its independence during the scramble for Africa. During the World War II, Liberia supported the United States war effort against Germany, and in turn, the U.S. invested in considerable infrastructure in Liberia to help its war effort, which also aided the country in modernizing and improving its major air transportation facilities. In addition, President William Truman encouraged economic changes internationally. Liberia was a founding member of the League of Nations, United Nations, and Organization of African Unity. It was a founding member of League of Nations, United Nations, and Organization of African Unity. Now, it's funny, it's very ironic that Liberia was a founding member of the United Nations, right? But why do you not hear about Liberia when it comes down to the United Nations? It's funny you find this out, but why don't we hear much about Liberia when it comes to United Nations? And then it says the Americo Liberian, right? Settlers did not relate well with the indigenous people they encountered, especially those in communities of the more isolated bush. The colonial settlements were raided by the Karoo and Gribo from their inland chiefdoms. Americo Liberians developed a small elite that held on a political power, and indigenous tribesmen were excluded from the birthright citizen in their own land until 1904. In the echo of the United States treatment of Native Americans, Americo Liberians promoted religious organizations to set up missions and schools to educate the indigenous people. It says in 1980, political tensions from the rule of William R. Tolbert result in a military coup during which Tolbert was killed, marking the beginning of years-long political instability, 5 years of military rule by People's Redemption Council, and 5 years of civilian rule by National Democratic Party of Liberia were followed by the First and Second Liberian Civil Wars. These resulted in the deaths of 250,000 people, about 8% of the population, and the displacement of many more, and shrank Liberia's economy by 90%. A peace agreement in 2003 led to the Democratic election in 2005, in which Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was elected president, making history as the first female president in the continent. National infrastructure and basic social service were severely affected by the conflicts, as well as by the 2013 to 2016 outbreak of Ebola virus, with 83% of the population living below international poverty line as of 2015. All right. So let's see what else. Let's read something else real quick. Okay. I'm gonna read this first paragraph, then I'm gonna skip down. All right. It says undated Acheulean artifacts are abundant across West Africa, attesting to the presence of ancient humans. The emerging chronometric record of the Middle Stone Age indicates that core and flake technologies have been present in West Africa. Give me a moment, you guys. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So undated Acheulean artifacts are abundant across West Africa, attesting to the presence of ancient humans. The emerging chronometric record of the Middle Stone Age indicates that core and flake technologies have been present in West Africa since at least the Middle Pleistocene, and that they persist on the terminal Pleistocene or Heliocene boundary, the youngest example of such technology anywhere in Africa. The presence of MSA, right, which is Middle Stone Age population in forest remains an open question. However, technological differences may correlate with various ecological zones. Later Stone Age population evidence significant technological diversification, include both microlithic and macrolithic tradition. All right. All right. So let's read right here what it says about the Pepper Coast. The Pepper Coast, also known as the Grain Coast, has been inhabited by indigenous people in Africa at least as far back as 12th century. Mende-speaking people expanded westward from the Sudan, forcing many smaller ethnic groups southward towards the Atlantic Ocean. The Didi, Baza, Kuru, Gola, Kisi were some of the earliest documented peoples in the area. This influx of these groups were compounded by the decline of the Western Sudanic Mali Empire in 1375, the Songhai Empire in 1591. The area now called Liberia was part of the Kingdom of Koya. So the area that was known as Liberia today was part of the Kingdom of Kola, right? And it was from 1450 to 1898. So real quick, let's look at the Kingdom of Koya. Kingdom of Koya, right? The Kingdom of Koya, or Koya Tinen, or the Timnan Kingdom, was a pre-colonial African state in the north of present-day Sierra Leone. The kingdom was founded by Timnan ethnic group in or around 1505 by migrants from the north seeking trade with the coastal Portuguese in the south. Right? The kingdom was ruled by a king called Bai or Obai. The sub-kingdoms within the state were ruled by nobles titled Jibana. The Koya kingdom kept and maintained diplomatic relations with the British and French in the 18th century. Children of Time nobles were allowed to seek Western education abroad. Koya also traded with Islamic states to its north and had Muslims within its border. And let's check this out right here. All right, it says, under Nambanga's reign from 1775 to 1793, the Koya kingdom signed a treaty which made it possible for the establishment of a British colony on the peninsula of Sierra Leone in 1788. And do you know what that colony was? You'll find out. Koya participated in the transatlantic slave trade. Now, it says the Koya kingdom participated in the transatlantic slave trade. Let's find out. Those sources state that such commerce was much more privatized than in other kingdoms. Subjects of Koya traded in slaves on the coast, even against the wishes of the state at times. It says from 1801 to 1807, Koya fought a war with British colonists and the Susu. Koya lost the northern shoreline of Sierra Leone to the British and Port Loco to the Susu. However, they remained a power in the region. In 1815, the Time fought another war with the Susu and regained the port. In 1841, the Time defeated the local tribe of Kasona on the Mabole River, dispersing many of the people. In response to a British bombardment, the kingdom expelled the Church Missionary Society missionaries operating at Mabila in 1860. And the kingdom became a British protectorate August 31st, 1896, after which the Kola kings lost virtually all power. Revolts of the Time and Mende in 1898 were fierce but futile. The British would govern the area of the former kingdom until 1961. So the kingdom of Kola went from being a powerful kingdom, right, within that West African region, to losing its power over to the British. So the British was controlling that area, right, until 1961. Until 1961. Hold on. So what does that mean? Was Liberia truly independent? I mean, it was probably independent as a country, but it was still under whose control? Who was controlling those Western colonies? Who's controlling those colonies in Africa? The British and the French, right? So therefore, Liberia was falling under a victim of the Great Britain. But that's interesting. But let's continue. Let's go back and read. All right. So, and it says, as inland regions underwent desertification, inhabitants moved to the wetter coast. These new inhabitants brought skills such as cotton spinning, cloth weaving, iron smelting, rice, and sorghum cultivation, and social and political institution from the Mali and Songhai empires. Shortly after the main conquered the region, right, the vile people of the former Mali Empire immigrated to the Grand Cape Mount County region. The ethnic Karoo opposed the influx of vile, forming an alliance with the Maine to stop further influx of vile. And it says people along the coast built canoes and traded with other West Africans from Cape Verde to the Gold Coast, right? And Gold Coast today is known as Ghana. Arab traders entered the region from the north, and a long established slave trade took captives to the North and East Africa. Yes, it is. Knowledge is power. Absolutely. All right. And then we're going to go by the early colonization. It says between 1461 and the late 17th century, Portuguese, Dutch, and British traders had contacts and trading posts in the region. The Portuguese named the area Costa de Pimentia, which means pepper coast, but it later became known as the Grand Coast due to the abundance of Meleguta peppers grains. European traders would barter commodities and goods with local people. All right, so we're going to skip down real quick. All right, so it says, these free African Americans and their descendants married within their community and came to identify as Americo-Liberians. All right, and we're going to look that up in a minute. Many were of mixed race and educated in American culture. They did not identify with the indigenous natives of the tribe they encountered. They intermarried largely with the colonial community, developing an ethnic group that they had cultural tradition infused with Americans' notions of political republicanism and Protestant Christianity. So let's look up the Americo-Liberian. Who were they? All right. So, Americo-Liberian people, or Congo people, or Kongu people in Liberian English are Liberian ethnic groups of African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, liberated African descent. The sister ethnic group of the Americo-Liberians are the Sierra Leone Creole people who share similar ancestry and related culture, right? Americo-Liberians trace their ancestry to free-born and formerly enslaved African Americans who immigrated in the 19th century to become the founders of the state of Liberia. They identify there as Americo-Liberians. Some African Americans follow resettlement in Canada also participate as founding settlers in Sierra Leone, and other recaptive repatriates settle in present-day Côte d'Ivoire, which is Ivory Coast. Although the terms Americo-Liberian and Congo had distinct definition in the 19th century, they are currently interchangeable and refer to the ethnic group composed of the descendants of various free and ex-slave African Americans, Caribbean, recaptive, and Sierra Leone Creoles who settled in Liberia from 1822. And it says destination Congo for the Americo-Liberian population came into common usage when these African Americans integrated 5,000 liberated Africans called Congos, former slaves from the Congo Basin, who were freed by British and Americans from slave ships after the prohibition of the African slave trade, and 500 Barbadian immigrants into Americo-Liberian hegemony, right? And it says Americo-Liberians rarely intermarry with indigenous West Africans. Although Western literature and discourse in the United States and the United Kingdom use the term Americo-Liberians, this term is outdated and in common parlance. The majority of Liberians, including the Americo-Liberian people themselves and the neighboring West Africans, such as Sierra Leoneans, refer to Liberian people as Congo or Kongu people. Upper class Americo-Liberians and their descendants led the political, social, cultural, and economic sectors of the country. They ruled the new nation from 19th century to 1980 as a small but dominant minority. From 1878 to 1980, the Republic of Liberia was a de facto one-party state ruled by both the indigenous and Americo-Liberian dominated True Wing Party and Masonic orders of Liberia. So again, so that's the Americo-Liberians. So the Americo-Liberians are known today as the Congo people. That's what they're known today as, the Congo people. All right. So let's go down here and let's skip real fast. Let's look at development, society, or settlement. Okay, so we're going to look at the settlement real quick, all right? All right, so the Americo-Liberians established several settlements among the St. Paul River, such as Monrovia, right? Coulterville, right? Or Coulterville, Carysburg, Clay Ashland, Buchanan, Maryland, Mississippi in Africa, and Greenville. And you notice they carry on some of the Americans' names, right? They carry on the names that come from the states, one of the 50 states, and that's what they named them. Check this out. Right here it says, several of the Americano-Liberians also settled in Cape Mount, and the Barbadian settlers who were incorporated into the Americo-Liberian or Congo ethnicity settled in Coulterville and included prominent families such as the Barkays, Morgans, Best, Throats, Weeks, and Portmans. The original Congo people or liberated Africans or recaptives were settled in New Georgia. And you see, New Georgia is named after the state of Georgia. That's interesting. And were incorporated into the Americo-Liberian ethnic group. Immigrants from Sierra Leone and the Gold Coast settled in Monrovia or in other Americo-Liberian settlements, right? And were incorporated into Americo-Liberian society. There was a distinction between the rural upriver Americo-Liberians and the political and mercantile orient Americo-Liberians in Monrovia. All right, so let's go ahead and skip down and look at the political development. Okay. So real fast, it says, as founders of nation take up about 5% of the Liberian population, Americo-Liberians had a leading role national politics from the founding of the colony until Samuel Doe led a military coup in 1980. There was a debate about how Americo-Liberians held on to power for so long. Some attribute it is to the fact that division were based on colorism, particularly because the first president was of mixed race, as were numerous immigrants, reflecting the nature of African American society in the Upper South, right? Scholars have noted, however, that during the Americo-Liberian reign, The leaders. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so the leaders had an array of skin colors from very dark skin to light skin African European admixture, meaning that that theory is unlikely. It is more likely they built their power on their familiarity with American culture and economics, shared lineage, and ability to create a network of shared interests. Others believe their long reign was in part. Excuse. Okay, I'm back, you guys. Sorry about that. All right. So leaving off with his meaning that theory is unlikely. It's more like they built their power on their familiarity with American culture and economic share lineage, ability to create a network of shared interests. Others believe their long reign was part due to the Masonic Orders of Liberia, a fraternal organization. A marble Masonic lodge was built in 1867 as one of Monrovia's most impressive buildings. It was considered as uh, Bayesians of Americo-Liberian power and was strong enough to survive the Civil War. After years of neglect after the war, the Masonic Order has repaired the lodge. Okay. So their political government structure was set up similar to America's because, again, these African people, the African descendant that went over to Liberia, they had the mindset, they had a Western mindset. Okay, they had a Western mentality. That's what they had. So that's how they operate under a Western way of thinking. All right, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and skip down real fast. Let's look at the culture. Okay, so we're gonna look at culture real quick. All right. So the culture, Americo-Liberian culture, is a blend of African American and Caribbean culture brought to Liberia by various Americans, recaptive and West Indian settlers, and is exhibited by the cuisine, language, and architectural style of the Americo-Liberians. The Americo-Liberians included various aspects of African Americans' culture in Liberia, including Liberian settler English and a unique form of antebellum architecture, right? And furthermore, Americo-Liberians contribute to the culinary cuisine of the region by introducing American baking technique. All right. So that's the culture. Let's look at the education. All right. So the Americo-Liberians arrived with varying degrees of formal and informal education. Americo-Liberians established schools and also established the University of Liberia, formerly Liberia College, in addition to other higher learning institutes such as Covington College. The Americo-Liberians were among the first Black Africans to qualify as medical doctors and lawyers in the United States. Prominent Americo-Liberian pioneers include Dr. Solomon Carter Fuller, a distinguished Harvard-educated Liberian psychiatrist and physician. Several Americo-Liberians worked as teachers and taught both Americo-Liberian and Liberians from other ethnic groups. Americo-Liberians made a concerted effort to educate Liberians from other ethnic groups, including through the use of the ward system. All right. So again, the education system seems like it's similar to ours. All right. So we're going to look at the religion. Okay, let's look at religion. So what's the main religious practice? The Americo-Liberians introduced Protestant Christianity on a wider scale in the modern-day region of Liberia. Several Americo-Liberians served as missionaries to other ethnic groups in Liberia and were among the first Baptist, Methodist, and Episcopal missionaries of Black African descent in Liberia. All right. Then it goes in and talk about the language. All right, so let's look at the language. Their language is the Americo-Liberians introduced a form of African American vernacular English that's influenced the existing Pidgin English or patois that exists in the region of Liberia from the pre-colonial era. This form, called Standard Liberian English or Liberian Settler English, continues to be spoken by descendants of the original settlers today. Now, if you hear how some Liberians talk, like some of them sound similar to those in New York, and some of them sound like those that are Caribbean, because it's a combination of not only the African American vernacular English, but also the patois, which is mostly spoken in the Caribbeans, that is mixed in, that's blended in together. All right, so if you want to learn more, you can go on wikione.com, look up Americo-Liberian, and see. Let's see where the references are at. You can see down here what says Gold Coast Euro Africans. Give you the list: Mississippi and Africa, the Sierra Leone Creole people, and then also you can look at the references right here. There's the reference source right here at the very bottom. And then you can also look up the external sources, etc. And then these are subtopics like American diaspora, African American topic, African diaspora, ethnic group in Liberia, categories, etc. So you can go ahead and look that up. All right. So real quick, let me go ahead and play this video from you guys, which is the celebration of the Independence Day in Liberia. Okay. Okay. So that was the parade that you saw. Okay. That was the parade. So you guys, I have to get ready to log off here, but let me say something, and to the ADOS people especially. The people of Liberia that's living in that country, they are descendants of African Americans. Okay. They are descendants of those that have been enslaved. The people in the people in Mexico, the Afro-Mexican, they are descendant of African or former African slaves that came from the United States. So you ain't got no place to be telling nobody that they are not a descendant of slaves, okay? And when half of y'all don't even really know your own descendancy like that, let's be straight up. Half of y'all don't even know your own descendancy. Half of y'all don't even know about your grandmothers and your grandfathers like that. So you ain't in a place to tell nobody else, all right? So with that being said, you guys, please take it easy. May peace and power elevation be to all of you. And make sure you share this video. If you like the video content, if you're on YouTube and you want to subscribe to my channel, go ahead and subscribe at Tiffany French. And, hit the notification bell when I'm on. Make sure you share this channel. Until then, until next time, may peace be to you guys and be safe out there and stay on top of your game. All right. Deuces, and I'll talk to y'all later. All right, then.